Yesterday, I put out a video about how long I think the Demon Slayer game's going to go, specifically how far into the story it's going to go. There was actually an issue in the publishing process for that video. It was completely my fault, but because of that issue in publishing, a lot of people didn't see this video in their subscription feed. So if you haven't actually seen that video, I'll leave a link to it in the description and at the end of this video, so go check that out. But in that video, I asked you guys if you wanted to see a speculation about the roster of this game. I got a lot of feedback asking me to do that video. I also did a poll on my community tab. The poll was very close, but you guys were in favor of it. I feel like I didn't express the exact purpose of this video very well because a lot of people said things like, wait for gameplay, that way you have a better understanding of what characters to expect in the game, that way you're not just guessing at the characters. But the whole point of this type of video is to be guessing at the characters. Besides, waiting for gameplay isn't going to give us any important critical information about what the rosters are going to look like, other than exactly what characters are going to be playable, which kind of defeats the purpose of a prediction anyway. The only information CC2 could possibly give us that would make our prediction method any better would be the exact number of characters that are going to be on the roster, which I'm almost certain that we're not going to get that information. At least not until much further down the line. There are two basic assumptions I need to make to be able to do this video. One of those assumptions is the fact that the game is an arena fighter. Of course, it's still possible that the game's going to come out and not be an arena fighter, and I also have to pick a point at where I expect the game to stop. I've actually covered both of these topics in separate videos. Like I said, yesterday's video was about how far I expect the story to go, and then I think the day before that, I did a video about why I think this is going to be an arena fighter. If you're one of those people who think it's not going to be an arena fighter, I would highly suggest watching that video because the evidence that we have right now is pretty strong. Of course, it's possible that either or even both of those assumptions are going to turn out to be wrong, but I do think that those assumptions are fair enough. You might be wondering why I don't just wait until we have 100% confirmation that it is an arena fighter. Well, there's a couple reasons I don't want to wait. One is that I think it's really fun to try and speculate about the roster with such little information. If we wait to get more information about the game and we have 100% confirmation that it's an arena fighter, we're probably also going to get confirmation of a couple playable characters, which kind of defeats the purpose of trying to predict the entirety of the roster. And on top of that, if it turns out to not be an arena fighter, well then I'm never going to be able to do this video. And I enjoy doing these videos. So originally this wasn't going to be a quote unquote prediction list, and I still don't think this is necessarily like my official prediction list, because for example, if additional information does come out and we find out that the game will go past the events of the movie, which is certainly possible, although I'm not exactly expecting it, or if we get information suggesting that the game's only going to cover the events of season 1, well then maybe there might be a reason for me to update this video. I'm not expecting that to happen, but if it does, just keep in mind that this prediction list might not be the like 100% official Bilbsy prediction list. Originally, I was just going to do a video where I go over the events of the anime, talking about what characters absolutely need to be playable, and the more I scripted out that video, the more I realized this was turning into a prediction list, so let's just do a prediction list. Again, this is my very initial thoughts on the roster. It's possible things could change in the future. The main method of prediction I'll be using in this video is a similar one to what I used in the One's Justice prediction video. If you missed my coverage of that game, the basic idea is that the vast majority of the characters that will be on the roster should be used in a story mode fight. The reason we use this as our predictive method is because if we were in the position of game director or lead game designer, we would want our resources to go to the most optimal places possible. If we're going to need to create a character for a fight in story mode, we might as well make them playable because we already have to make a part of their moveset anyway. It's just about a smart allocation of resources. So let's get the easy characters out of the way. Obviously, Tanjiro, Nezuko, Inosuke, and Zenitsu are going to be playable. Even if this game turns out to not be an arena fighter, I'm expecting those characters to be playable. Another assumption we have to make for this game is that it's going to follow the exact story of the manga and the anime. If that is the case, there's kind of one of three different moments the story could choose to start at. The first moment is the very first fight of the series. Tanjiro, Nezuko, and Giyu have a fight together. Making this the very first mission is kind of awkward because it would work as a tutorial mission. Tanjiro doesn't actually have his sword yet, he uses a hatchet. So you would either have to give him a temporary moveset that only works in this tutorial mission, which seems like an odd thing to do for a tutorial mission because you would want to teach people how to use that character at the very least. So giving him a temporary moveset just kind of seems odd. Alternatively, you could just give him his sword, which would break the canon of the story. My solution to the problem would be to have you play as Nezuko, who does most of the fighting in this fight anyway, and you wouldn't have to change up her moveset at all. The only issue with this is that it's kind of weird having you play Nezuko, who's not the main character, in the very first mission of the story mode. So honestly, they might just end up skipping this encounter encounter and having you start somewhere later in the story. For example, the second point in the story they could start is the fight with Sabato. This makes the most sense to me because this fight is split up into two separate events. One at the beginning where he's initially training Tanjiro and then he goes on like a 2-year time skip. So it kind of works perfectly for a tutorial mission, right? Because the first part of the fight can be, hey, here's how you use all of the buttons. And then the second part of the fight can be, all right, you understand the basic mechanics, now actually fight this guy. And then the third option is the final selection. It's possible this will just be the point that the game starts because it's the footage that we've seen so far. Maybe they're just showing us that footage as a starting point. I don't think that they're going to start the game here, although it is possible. The only reason why I mention all of this is because it kind of determines Sabato's fate. If they start the series at the final selection, of course, there's no reason for Sabato to be playable. If they start it at the Sabato fight, obviously Sabato needs to be playable. If they start it all the way back in the forest, the temple demon needs to be playable because that fight happens in between Sabato and the forest scene. For the purposes of this list, I'm going to go ahead and say that temple demon does not make the cut, although I do think that decision is really close. I think it's very possible that temple demon does make the cut, but for the purposes of this list, I'm going to say he doesn't, and then Sabato does make the list. During the final selection arc, Tanjiro fights a bunch of demons, like a lot. He mostly one-shots them, and I don't think it's necessary to slow down the pace of the game so much that you have him fight every single one of those. So I think the best method would be to summarize all of those fights he has with demons by just using the Blade Demon and this generic demon that the Blade Demon fights with. These two demons have actually already been confirmed for the game. We've seen them in screenshots. It's just a matter of whether they're actually playable or not. For the purposes of this list, I'm going to say that both of these characters are playable. It's very possible that they're just combined into one character, but I don't think it's particularly important for the list. We'll just say that they're both playable. They might do this thing where those extra demons do join the roster and they all just have the exact same moveset as this generic demon, but I'm not expecting that. Obviously, the big bad boss, the hand demon, does need to be playable. We've already seen this character in game. Obviously, we don't know if he's playable yet. Some people might think, well, he's far too big to be a playable character. We've had this argument 1,000 times in games before. Size doesn't matter. We've seen characters like Ridley in Smash, even in a game by the same developer, CyberConnect 2, you can transform into Jinchuriki and Susanos, and you can still play the game perfectly fine. So of course, the hand demon will be playable. Shortly after the final selection, Tanjiro heads off on his first mission. He and Nezuko end up fighting the Swamp Demon. The Swamp Demon is easily going to be a playable character, right? I don't think that's too controversial of a take. I think he should actually have a pretty exciting moveset, kind of like Pain from the Storm series, right? Because he's kind of multiple characters in one. On the way to Tanjiro's next mission, he gets an encounter with Muzan. I don't think that this will be a fight in the game, but regardless, I think that they will make this version of Muzan playable, kind of like a Muzan moveset where he's holding back rather than using his full power. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Muzan's too popular to not include in the game. He might end up being DLC or something like that, but I'd be shocked if this version of Muzan is not playable in some way. This ends up leading into a pretty fun arc with the Tamari and the Arrow Demon, both of which I do think would be playable as a result. I do think Yushiro has a chance. In fact, I will put Yushiro on the list. He's a big part of that fight, so you can space it out and you can have him be playable. Also, he's got a unique power that would make him a fun playable character, at least in my opinion. The next arc is the one with Kyogai. Obviously, we have to have Kyogai be playable, but I also think that the Tongue Demon and the Horn Demon will also be playable so that they can add extra fights for Inosuke and Zenitsu. You'll have to make up most of their moveset, but I think that's okay for demons because we're never going to see them again. Then we move into my favorite arc that's been animated so far, the Spider Demon arc. This arc has a lot going on with it. Let's get the easy ones out of the way. Of course, Rui, Mother, Brother, Father Demon will all be playable with their respective fights. Even the Sister Demon should be in theory playable because she has a fight with Shinobu. Speaking of which, add Shinobu to the list. Mother Demon is kind of strange because she uses two different types of puppets, this crazy demon looking thing and then the Demon Slayers. I think she will use both of those in her moveset, but there is actually a moment in the story where our main characters are fighting these puppets and they don't actually realize that they are puppets. CC2 might end up doing a thing where they use these generic Demon Slayers and they give them this generic moveset that they can just kind of throw onto any generic Demon Slayer. That might be a very valuable thing to have developed because it does a couple of things for you. It lets you do things like this, where you can have the player fight these puppets without knowing that they're puppets. And then on top of that, you could even make a character like Murata playable. I mean, you would have to come up with a super move for him, but that shouldn't be too difficult to do. You could probably turn it into a joke or something like that. And because having a generic sword fighter moveset would be very valuable for CC2, I'm actually going to add Murata to the list because what they can do is they can just develop Murata as a playable character and then they can just slap his generic swordsman moveset onto anybody that they need to at the time. Kanao has a fight with Tanjiro and Nezuko, so she makes the cut. If they want to, they can also use her later in the training arc for season 1. They can turn that into a couple fights if they want to. Giyu and Shinobu also have a fight in this arc, so I'll add him to the playable character list. Of course, he's an incredibly popular character as well, so they'll probably go out of their way to make him playable. CC2 is in a strange spot when it comes to Sanemi as a character because he does have a tiny little fight with Tanjiro. It's not really a fight, it's just kind of a scuffle, and they could force that into a fight for gameplay reasons, but the problem is you start risking revealing too much about Sanemi's moveset, so they might just end up making this into a cutscene rather than a fight, but I could see them going either way. Right now, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave him off of the list. Okay, now we're going to move into the movie. Don't worry, I will not show screenshots of any characters who have not been used in the anime so far, just to avoid some spoilers. I'm guessing that Enmu, Rengoku, the Nameless Demon, and Akaza is, I'm guessing how you pronounce that one, will all be playable in this game. That is a whopping 28 characters for the very first Demon Slayer game. That's 3 more than the first Storm game, so don't get too shocked about how small that list is. And there are even a few characters who I did not add to this list that could very easily make the cut. There are some joke characters like Hotaru that could pretty easily be playable. There are a bunch of joke characters in the Storm series, and Demon Slayer has a big comedic aspect to it, so they could turn a couple of his encounters with Tanjiro into actual fights in the game, which I think would be pretty funny. Yuriko Daki could be a playable character, but he's not really used in the story of season 1 for any fights. He does have a flashback fight, so maybe that type of character could be reserved for DLC as opposed to the base roster. Io Kanzaki could be playable, but I highly doubt it. That's another one of those things where you have to kind of make up the moveset for her, which isn't too big of a deal, I don't think. The problem is it does ruin a bit of the aesthetic for the anime-only viewers, and to be honest, I don't know how they're going to handle DLC in this game at all. They might just throw us some characters, they might make up some original stories for some characters. One thing I thought of while I was recording this video is perhaps Muzan could actually be left as DLC, and that way the DLC story, because that's what CC2 does with their DLC, they usually tell stories, they could tell the story of when he fights all of those extra demons at the end of season 1. So maybe some of those demons could be playable as DLC characters as well, but again, you would have to make up their moveset. Regardless, I'd be pretty happy with this roster that you see on your screen now. I think it's a pretty solid lineup. Demon Slayer has this really cool thing going for it where it's like most of its character designs are incredibly amazing. Even character designs who like visually don't line up with me, they have some awesome power that's really cool. So aesthetically, Demon Slayer's got it, you know? So whatever characters they put in the game, I'm gonna have fun with. This is just the prediction list that I came up with. Again, this isn't an exact science. It's possible that other information's going to come out about the game that would modify my prediction list. I'm obviously not going to do an updated prediction list every time we get more information about the game, but you know, 6 months from now, if we have a completely different outlook about what this game is going to end up being, I can just do an updated prediction list video. If I make minor tweaks to the prediction list, I'll probably just do an update on Twitter. But apart from that, this is the prediction list that I'm looking at for now. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, I'd really appreciate a like. This type of video takes a very long time, so it would be very much appreciated. My name is Bilbzy. I'll be sure to catch you in the next one. Have a fantastic day.